The cake has exactly 7 candles on it. I counted them twice because my son kept asking me to, his little finger pointing at each one while he whispered the numbers under his breath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He's been doing that all morning, counting things. The napkins, the juice boxes, the paper plates with rocket ships on them. He's 7 years old today, and everything in the world is countable, knowable, certain. I am not certain about anything. I check my phone again. It's 1:47 p.m. The party started at 1. My brother texted at 11:30 that morning. Running a little behind, we'll be there. My mother sent a voice note I still haven't fully listened to. I played the first 8 seconds, heard honey, about today, and then a customer walked into the bakery where I work and I had to put my phone away and I never went back to it. I told myself I'd listen on my lunch break. Then I told myself I'd listen in the car. Then I told myself it didn't matter because they'd be here by 1. It is now 1:47. My son doesn't know they're late. He's too busy showing his best friend the new remote control car I stayed up until midnight wrapping. The living room is full of noise and streamers, and the good kind of chaos, the kind that belongs to children who have no idea what adults are doing in the background. His friend's mom is laughing at something near the snack table. My neighbor is refilling the juice cups. Everything looks fine. I go to the kitchen and listen to my mother's voice note. Honey, about today. Your father's back is really bad this weekend. He can barely move and I don't think we should leave him alone. You understand. We'll make it up to you. Kiss the birthday boy for me. That was it. That was the whole message. I put my phone face down on the counter and stood there for a moment looking at the kitchen tile. It's a small crack near the baseboard I've been meaning to fix for 2 years. I thought about the crack. I thought about nothing. Then I picked the phone back up and called my brother. He didn't answer. I texted, "Hey, are you guys still coming?" The message sat there on red for 11 minutes before he replied, "Sorry, something came up. Happy birthday to the little man." Something came up. My son's name is Theo, he's 7. He'd been asking since March whether Uncle Grant was going to come to his rocket party. He asked me that specific question, "Is Uncle Grant coming?" At least 14 times between March and today. Each time I said yes, he's coming, he promised. My brother had in fact promised. He said it on the phone in April when I called to give him the details. He said, "I'll be there. I wouldn't miss it." I remember the exact moment because I was standing in the parking lot of my son's school picking him up, and Theo was pulling on my sleeve because he'd lost a tooth that day, and he wanted to tell everyone immediately. And I held up one finger, "1 second, buddy," to catch the tail end of my brother's sentence, and what I heard was I wouldn't miss it. I believed him. I don't know why I'm still surprised when I shouldn't be. The party ended at 4. Theo's friends went home one by one, their parents gathering up jackets and forgotten shoes, and my neighbor helped me fold up the tablecloth and stack the extra plates. The living room got quiet. Theo sat in the middle of the floor surrounded by his presents, pressing a button on the remote control car, watching it drive into the wall, reversing, driving again. "Is Uncle Grant still coming?" he asked. I said Uncle Grant had to help Grandpa because Grandpa's back was hurting. Theo thought about this. "Does Grandpa's back hurt a lot?" "Sometimes," I said. He nodded, serious. Then, "Can I have another piece of cake?" I said yes. I went to the kitchen and cut the piece and stood at the counter while the frosting got on my fingers and I stared at the wall for longer than I needed to. When I brought the cake out, Theo was still pressing the button. Drive, wall, reverse. Drive, I am a dental hygienist. I work 4 days a week and I have Fridays off, which is how I arranged to take the day off for Theo's party. I am not rich. I am not struggling in a way that keeps me up at night, but I watch every dollar. Theo's dad and I separated when Theo was 2. No drama, no court battles, just 2 people who are better at being friends than at being married. He pays his half of everything, we're fine. What I'm telling you is that I have a budget, and I stick to it, and I made that budget work for a bounce house rental I couldn't really afford. Because Theo had specifically asked for a bounce house at his rocket party and I am his mother, and he is 7 years old once. The bounce house cost me $385. The cake was $90 because I wanted it to look like a rocket ship and the grocery store cake wasn't going to cut it. The decorations, the food, the party favors. Altogether, I spent just over $800 on a birthday party for a 7-year-old. Which I did not mind, which I would do again tomorrow. What I minded was the text I received 4 days later. It was a Tuesday. I was eating lunch in my car in the parking lot of the dental office, the way I do when I need 20 minutes of quiet. My phone buzzed and I saw my mother's name and I thought maybe she was calling to apologize, or at least to ask how the party went. The text said, "Hi sweetheart, I know the timing isn't great but your cousin Bree's graduation party is next month and we're trying to pull together the money for the venue and catering. It's going to be around $2,100 total. I was hoping you could contribute. We were thinking maybe $700? Your brother and your aunt are also chipping in. It would mean a lot to Bree and to all of us." I read it 3 times. The first time I read it, I thought I'd misunderstood. The second time I thought maybe there was context I was missing. Maybe my cousin Bree was sick, maybe this was some kind of urgent situation. Maybe the third time I understood that there was no missing context. My mother had skipped my son's birthday party 4 days prior, for reasons that included my father's bad back but also, as I would later learn from my aunt, who has never in her life successfully kept a secret, a winery tour she and my father had been planning for weeks. And now she was asking me for $700 toward a graduation party for a 22-year-old I'd seen exactly twice in the past 3 years. I sat in my car for a while. I ate the second half of my sandwich. I thought about what to say. Here's what you need to understand about my family. I am the oldest. I have always been the oldest in the way that oldest children in certain families understand, not just in birth order but in expectation. I was the first to get a real job. I was the first to be stable, reliable, the one people called when things went sideways. When my parents' furnace broke 3 winters ago, they called me and I paid half. When my brother got laid off 2 years ago and needed to cover his rent for 1 month, he asked me, and I said yes, and he paid me back 7 months later, and only because I finally asked about it. When my aunt needed someone to drive her to her medical appointments last spring, she called me, not her own daughter, not my brother, me. I am the person in my family who shows up. I have always been proud of that. I think I confused it with being loved. I texted my mother back. I said, I need to think about it. She said, of course, take your time. But the venue deposit is due in 2 weeks. That night, after Theo went to bed, I sat at my kitchen table and I opened my laptop and I looked at my bank account. I looked at it the way I had looked at it many times, carefully, practically, adding and subtracting. The bounce house rental was still on my credit card. I had $412 in my savings account that I was not going to touch because it was the beginning of my emergency fund, and I had promised myself I would never dip below it again after the year Theo was 3 and my car broke down and I had nothing. I had a dentist appointment I'd been putting off for myself. Not a cleaning, an actual procedure, something I'd already pushed back twice because of the cost. $700. I thought about Theo asking, is Uncle Grant coming 14 times over 6 weeks? I thought about him sitting in the middle of the floor pressing a button, drive, wall, reverse. I thought about my mother's voice note, you understand. And how those 2 words were doing a tremendous amount of work in that sentence. How much she assumed I understood, how long I had let her assume it. I thought about a conversation I'd had with Theo's teacher in February. She'd pulled me aside at pickup to mention that Theo sometimes seemed anxious about things changing, about whether the people he was expecting to show up actually would. She framed it gently, professionally. She said it wasn't concerning, just something to be aware of. She said 7-year-olds were very perceptive. I closed my laptop. I wrote a message to my mother. I revised it twice. I kept coming back to the same core, the same thing I needed to say, the thing I had been rephrasing and softening and burying under courtesy for years. In the end, the version I sent was this: Mom, I'm not going to be able to contribute to Bree's graduation party. I spent $800 on Theo's party last week, which I planned for months and which you, Dad, and Grant didn't attend. I love you and I want things to be different between us, but I can't keep being the person who pays and shows up while everyone else doesn't. I need you to hear that. I put my phone down on the kitchen table. I went and checked that Theo was asleep, which he was, on his stomach, one arm hanging off the bed, completely and utterly unconscious the way only children can sleep. I kissed the back of his head. I went back to the kitchen. My phone had 7 messages. The first 3 were from my mother. The tone moved very quickly from hurt to defensive to something that landed close to accusatory. I can't believe you'd bring up the party like that. Your father was in real pain. We've done so much for you over the years and this is how you respond? There were references to sacrifices I wasn't aware had been made. There was a sentence that began after everything we've done that I've heard enough times now that started to sound like a different language. Familiar sounds that no longer carry meaning. My brother texted, that was out of line. Mom is upset. My aunt texted, honey, I know you're frustrated, but maybe try to see it from their perspective. I read all of them. I didn't respond to any of them that night. What I did instead was sit at the kitchen table and think about a specific memory. Theo is 4 in this memory, and we're at my parents' house for Christmas. My brother is there with his girlfriend at the time, and my parents, and my aunt and her husband and Bree. After dinner, the adults are sitting around the table and Theo toddles over to my mother and wants to show her something. A toy he brought, something with buttons that makes noise. My mother looks down at him with a kind of distracted smile and says, not now, sweetheart, and turns back to the conversation. And Theo, who is 4 and has no context for any of this, just quietly puts the toy back in his bag and goes and sits next to me on the couch. He doesn't cry, he doesn't complain. He just accepts it. And I noticed it and I felt it and then I let it go because that's what I always did. I thought about how many times I had let things go because that's what I always did. The next morning I texted my brother. I hear that Mom is upset. I'm not trying to hurt anyone. But I said something true and I'm not going to apologize for it. He didn't respond. My mother called twice that day. I let it go to voicemail. The first message was more of the same. Hurt, defensive. The implication that I was being dramatic or ungrateful. The second message was shorter and cooler and ended with, "We'd really appreciate your contribution toward Bree's party. Please think it over." I thought it over. I called her back that evening. I kept my voice steady. I told her I wasn't contributing to the graduation party. I told her I wasn't saying this to punish anyone. I meant it, and I want to be clear that I meant it. I was saying it because I had a budget, and my budget didn't have $700 in it for a party for someone I barely knew. And the fact that I was even being asked this 4 days after a no-show at my son's birthday party was something I needed her to understand was not okay. She said she understood I was upset, but that this was important to the family. I said I understood. I said the party had been important to me and to Theo, and that had also apparently been important to consider. She said that wasn't fair. I said I knew it didn't feel fair, but that I had been doing a lot of showing up for a long time and I needed that to go both ways. There was a pause. Then she said, "I hope you know how hurtful this is." I said, "I hope you know how hurtful it was to have Theo ask me 11 times where you were." She hung up. 20 minutes later, my brother called and told me. And I want to be precise about how he said this because the phrasing still sounds unreal to me. He told me that if I wasn't going to contribute to the family when they needed me, they would have to find another way to get what they needed. He said this in a tone that sounded like a warning, and I asked him what that meant, and he said that they'd looked into it and there were options available to them. I said, "I don't know what that means." He said, "I'm just telling you, we have options." I didn't find out what he meant until 2 days later when there was a knock at my door at 6:45 in the evening. Theo and I were in the middle of dinner. I went to the door and there were 2 police officers standing on my porch. My heart did something I can't fully describe. Every rational thought I had vanished and I was just standing in my own doorway feeling like the floor was moving. They were very calm, very polite. One of them explained that they'd received a report of a financial dispute and wanted to make sure everything was okay. They asked if I was aware of a disagreement with family members regarding money. I stood there in my doorway while the smell of the pasta I'd made drifted out from behind me, while Theo was sitting at the table probably wondering why I wasn't coming back, while 2 police officers waited for me to explain my family to them. I told them yes, there was a disagreement. I told them my family had asked me for money, I had declined, and that was the full extent of what had happened. I showed them the text message chain on my phone. One of the officers looked at it for a moment, then handed it back to me. They exchanged a glance I've thought about many times since. They said they were sorry to have bothered me. They said it didn't sound like anything they needed to be involved in. One of them, before she turned to leave, said, "I hope things get easier for you." She sounded like she meant it. I said thank you and closed the door and stood in my entryway for what felt like a very long time. Then I walked back to the kitchen. Theo looked up from his pasta. "Who was at the door?" "Just some people with questions," I said. "Everything's fine." He looked at me for a second the way 7-year-olds look at you when they're not sure whether to believe you. Then he looked back at his plate and stabbed a piece of pasta with his fork. "Can I have more peas?" he asked. I gave him more peas. That night, after he was asleep, I did 3 things. I blocked my brother's number. I sent my mother a message that said, "I love you, but I need some distance right now. Please don't contact me for a while." And I sat on my couch in the quiet for a long time, not watching anything, not doing anything, just sitting. I thought about what I would have wanted someone to tell me 5 years ago. I think I would have wanted someone to say, "You are not required to fund people who treat you like a resource." I think I would have wanted someone to say it plainly, without cushioning it, without the gentle asterisks and the "I understand family is complicated." I think I knew it already, the way you know things that are uncomfortable to act on. I just needed to let myself know it. It has been 2 months. My mother has respected the distance, mostly. There was one text, about 6 weeks in, that said simply thinking of you, and I didn't respond, and there hasn't been another. My brother and I haven't spoken. My aunt reached out once and I told her kindly but clearly that I wasn't ready to talk. What I can tell you is that my son has been different. 3 weeks after all of this, his teacher stopped me at pickup. She said she'd noticed something and wanted to mention it. She said Theo had seemed lighter recently. Her word, lighter. And that he'd been more willing to take risks in class, raise his hand, try things. She said she didn't know what had changed at home, but whatever it was seemed to be working. I thanked her and walked to the car, and Theo climbed in and buckled his own seatbelt, which he'd recently learned to do, and I sat in the driver's seat for a second before starting the engine. "What?" he said, the way kids say it when you're looking at them and they can tell. "Nothing," I said. "I'm just looking at you." He made a face. "That's weird." "You're right," I said. "It is." I started the car and we drove home, and the windows were down, and he talked the whole way about something that had happened at recess involving a disputed call in Foursquare. And I listened to every word. And the evening light was doing that particular thing it does in late summer, where it comes in at a low angle and turns everything golden, and I thought, this is what I was protecting. This exact thing. This drive, this voice, this boy who trusts me to show up, and I always will.